Another mass shooting out of Chicago where you've got several people who are considered in critical condition as police continue to investigate what happened there, but they do have a suspect in that early Sunday morning shooting. Now, this follows, of course, another similar type of shooting down in Florida, and that all happens a week after or so of the mass shooting that happened in Maine. So a lot of questions around the issue of mass shootings and how to properly respond to those. Obviously, you've got the questions of gun and magazine bans being challenged on Second Amendment grounds and whether that's the answer to limit what kinds of firearms law-abiding citizens can have, let alone trying to curb any kind of violent crime from criminals who may have certain types of firearms. But let's hear what Chicago police had to say yesterday at a news conference up in Chicago following this story of around 15 people shot, 2 critically injured. Here is a police official from Chicago PD yesterday.
Shortly after 1 in the morning, 10th District officers responded to the 1200 block South Pulaski, where a shooting had just occurred at a Halloween gathering. Approximately 100 people were attending. Upon arrival, the officers were given information from partygoers with a brief description of the offender as well as the direction of flight. Responding officers observed the offender on the 4000 block of 14th Street. They placed him into custody immediately. A protective pat-down resulted in the recovery of a firearm. The victims, who range in age from 26 to 53, were taken to different hospitals within the area. 2 of the victims were transported in critical condition. The others were transported in good to fair condition. At this time, Area 4 detectives are investigating. They're interviewing the suspect, and they're trying to investigate what led up to the shooting. Victims and witnesses did relate that the suspect was ejected from the party, and he came back a few minutes later with a gun and began to shoot. We know that the location where the gathering took place has a history of throwing unlicensed events. Once CPD concludes their investigation, Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, BACP, and other city agencies will investigate and issue enforcement actions as needed.
So you've got the investigation not just around the suspect, but also around the facility. Here is the alderperson from that area where that mass shooting occurred early Sunday morning.
Hello, I'm Alderman Scott of the 24th Ward, and this senseless incident happened in my community. I don't know whether to scream or to cry. We shouldn't be out here on a Sunday because 15 victims lay in the hospital because they were shot, because someone couldn't get back into a party. When does this end, community? When does the fight stop fighting one another? I appreciate my community for being out here. I appreciate all of the elected officials. But I want you to know, community, I want you to know if you're looking and you are the bad guy, this has to stop. At what point does it stop? At what point does a parent, a grandmother, or a father get tired of burying their children?
Clearly, a question that's difficult to fully answer. How do you get the violence of this nature to stop? Allegedly, somebody was told to leave a party and not come back, and they came back and allegedly shot the place up. And I would share with you video from X, but it's graphic, and no need to share that with the audience this morning, but you can clearly go and find it online if you'd like. But it's a tragic incident where you've got somebody who clearly needs to be held accountable for their actions. You did have statements issued by Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson hours and hours after the actual story popped, and calls for some kind of statement, because Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson really hasn't, in a way, held many news conferences to talk about the violence that happens on the streets of Chicago every day. Because some of the headlines, I mean, I'll just go through some of the other headlines. Man 61 shot to death in West Garfield Park. Man shot and killed while riding bicycle in Woodlawn. Woman shot at Navy Pier after verbal altercation on a ship. police say. Other headlines from Chicago Tribune and the Sun-Times: 18-year-old fatally stabbed near Austin College and Career Academy High School, and pilot program would give CPD officials ownership over cases, and it could change how police handle homicide investigations to try to get that clearance rate up. But clearly you've got questions about enforcement and how to possibly battle against these types of parties that aren't sanctioned. Here's a Chicago police official being asked about this particular location where the mass shooting happened in Chicago early Sunday morning. Again, 15 people shot and 2 critically injured. And you've got this happening at a place where, yeah, it's an art gallery, but it was an unsanctioned party.
Right now, that's I was talking to BACP, and we do know that it is a licensed art gallery, and that's all we know about it. However, we know that they do host events that are not sanctioned, so therefore their art license doesn't allow that. We've had an incident back May 6th where we had to shut them down for an event, and this is another event that resulted in a tragedy. The one earlier on, we didn't have anything. We were able to catch it real quick. This one was all done by word of mouth, so we were not aware. We were caught off guard.
So again, police saying that they were caught off guard by this because they even had an incident back in May, unsanctioned event. They were able to shut that down, but Sunday morning's event going through word of mouth, and maybe police are going to be keeping a closer eye on some of the chatter that they have access to, be it on social media channels or however else they spread the word about these unsanctioned events. But how do you attack this? After last week's Maine mass shooting, a lot of focus was on, trying to ban certain types of weapons. But others were pointing to mental health issues and how the suspect in the Maine shooting had a 2-week stint in a mental health facility, and even had red flags raised about the individual wanting to shoot up the military base he worked at. Well, that suspect's now dead and found last week, apparently from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but still the issue of mental health, very, very top of mind for many. Governor J.B. Pritzker was asked about mental health issues last week. I don't know how it necessarily deals with what could be gang violence, but here's the governor from last week.
It's so incredibly disappointing that our nation has not acted on gun safety laws that really would keep these kinds of guns out of the hands of not just somebody who's mentally ill, but somebody who isn't and wants to do harm to a lot of people. And I will also say that there are many people who say in the wake of this, oh, don't go after these assault weapons. We should really be focused on mental health. Good. We should go after mental health. We should invest in mental health. But many of those same people, these are the NRA types, many of those same people, the elected officials, don't actually invest in mental health. They don't vote for budgets that help us with 24/7 facilities or attracting more workforce for treating mental health challenges. So, I'm disappointed in that. Everybody needs to wake up and recognize if they want to go do something and they're not willing to vote for gun safety laws, then come vote with the rest of us and advocate for mental health facilities and professionals who can really help people in need.
And listen, having watched this play out at the Illinois State House for almost 10 years now, and different conversations about how to curb violent crime and how to address gang activity, there's a whole host of proposals that Republicans have made, that even the Illinois State Rifle Association has made. The ISRA has said in the past that they're willing to throw their support behind crime interdiction programs, where you use tax dollars to help fund local programs in places like Chicago to, intercept young people into healthy programs that's after work or, developing trades, instead of them falling between the cracks to then become violent criminals and lead to what is alleged to be a incident where you've got alleged retaliatory attack. And even Mayor Brandon Johnson in his statements recognizing that, saying early this morning, and this was on Sunday, there was an alleged act of retaliation at a Halloween party in North Lawn community that left 15 people injured. Initial reports indicates the suspect was asked to leave the gathering before returning and senselessly opening fire. Goes on to say Chicago police responded to the shooting, then goes on to say that Chicago community safety will ensure that victims and survivors have the resources they need. Further goes on to say that Johnson's office will continue to mobilize full force of government to address those who have been hurt. And he goes on to say that sadly, mass casualty events like this are not exclusive to Chicago. Talked about a shooting down in Florida and Texarkana. And then you've also got the mayor saying the proliferation of high-powered artillery is tearing the fabric of our nation. And as long as I am mayor, Johnson says, Chicago will continue to lead the call for common-sense gun reform to bring safety to all communities. So, again, looking at gun reform instead of maybe some of the other issues that could address it, like dealing with mental health, like dealing with bipartisan support for crime intervention programs and making sure that those are actually programs that are held accountable. Again, just to hear what State Senator Jason Plummer said about the constant push to limit individuals' Second Amendment rights instead of actually going after some of the substantive reforms that could help curb violent gang activity.
Instead of pushing extreme legislation, why don't we address the issues at hand? They don't seem willing to do that because every issue is a partisan issue, and really every issue should be public policy driven, and there's ways to solve some of the problems that everyone wants to see addressed.
So will there be substantive conversations about all of those things? I guess we'll sit and see if indeed that does come about, but clearly there are substantial concerns surrounding the issue of gang violence, around mental health. While you've got some policymakers saying that the right's path is to instead curb the availability of commonly owned firearms, which is at the center of gun and magazine ban legislation that is currently being challenged in courts across the country. So plenty to talk about all of that. We'll definitely be tracking that here in the days and weeks ahead. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out. You can follow me anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air. Right here on YouTube, like, subscribe, and get that notification bell, and be sure to tune in each and every weekday morning as we do updates on what's going on with a variety of issues, including the litigation against gun and magazine bans in the state of Illinois and elsewhere. All right, stay tuned. We've got more coming up, including a conversation with William Kelly out of Chicago about the mass shooting, about crash and grabs, and also the increasing cost of migrants in the city of Chicago.